I was browsing the internet and I found this website called paleoleap.com. I found this article called What's Wrong with Beans and Legumes. I was reading it and thought, this is pretty dumb. There's so much misinformation in this article, and this whole website is full of misinformation as well. So I want to go through it and just pinpoint some of the things that are wrong about this article. So this article starts off by saying, unlike wheat, corn, and sugar, legumes generally aren't associated with junk food or processed food products. It's easy to conjure up hyperbolic images of Twinkies and Wonder Bread to demonize wheat, but lentil soup and hummus just doesn't have the same effect. Some legumes like soy are even widely considered to be health foods and marketed as nutritionally superior alternatives to animal products. But that doesn't make them optimal foods for human beings. Just because you can't find them at McDonald's doesn't make them healthy. So the first point that this article makes about why legumes aren't a health food and why animal products are superior is because of phytic acid. So this is the first point. There's no author of this article as well. I can't find who owns this website or who writes the articles and what their credentials are, but there are a heap of articles on this website about how saturated fat is not harmful, how animal foods are nutritious. The article says that like grains and pseudograins, legumes contain phytic acid. Phytic acid binds to nutrients in the food, preventing you from absorbing them. It doesn't steal any nutrients that are already in your body, but it does make that bowl of lentils a lot less nutrient dense than the nutrition facts panel would have you believe. For this reason, it's usually cited as a major downside of these foods, but the truth is clearly little more complicated because some paleo acceptable foods like nuts also contain relatively high amounts of it. So the website's basically saying that it's a toxin, but you can have it in small amounts, which is why they allow you to eat nuts, but don't eat beans and legumes because they contain higher amounts, and you shouldn't make beans and legumes a staple of your diet. And same with grains, don't make them a staple of your diet because they're high in phytates and they could make you nutritionally deficient. So it says, beans and legumes, unlike nuts and vegetables, are the primary source of calories for many people around the world, and eating food so rich in phytic acid as nutritional staples is quite unhealthy. So this website is saying that people who base their calories on starches like beans and legumes are unhealthy. But if you look at the blue zones are the longest living people in the world. Not only are they long living, but they tend to live a healthier lifestyle and suffer much less from heart disease, diabetes, and the common killers of the Western world. So these people of the blue zones are actually basing most of their diet on starches, and beans and legumes are a regular part of these people's diets. And Dr. Greger of nutritionfacts.org also has noted that beans and legumes are able to fight cancer because of the phytate in the beans. It's actually beneficial to our health to eat them. Beans can even slow your resting heart rate. Dr. Greger recently put out a video about that.
The accumulated weight of evidence linking elevated resting heart rate to a shortened lifespan, even in apparently healthy individuals, makes a strong case for it to be considered in the assessment of risk. If you put people through a 12-week aerobic conditioning program of cycling, Stairmaster, and running on a treadmill, you can drop their resting heart rate down from about 69 to about 66, so 3 beats per minute drop. Of course, you have to keep it up. Stop exercising, your resting heart rate goes right back up. Exercise is just one way to drop our heart rate, though. The way to our heart may also be through our stomach. What if instead of 3 months of exercise, you did 3 months of beans, a cup a day of beans, chickpeas, or lentils? The first randomized controlled trial of beans for the treatment of diabetes, and indeed successfully improved blood sugar control, dropping A1C levels from 7.4 to 6.9. But this was also the first study to ever assess the effect of bean consumption on heart rate, and indeed one of the few to determine the effect of on heart rate of any dietary intervention. Now, this is particularly important in diabetics, since having a higher resting heart rate not only increases the risk of death, just like everybody else, but also appears to predict greater risk of diabetic complications, such as damage to the nerves and eyes. So, how did beans do? A 3.4 beat drop in heart rate, just as much as the 250 hours on a treadmill. We're not sure why beans are as powerful as exercise in bringing down one's resting heart rate. In addition to the potential direct beneficial effects of all the good stuff in legumes, there's also the potential displacement value of reducing some of the animal protein foods by eating so many beans instead. Regardless, we should consider eating pulses for our pulse.
Dr. Michael Gerger also says that consumption of whole plant foods like beans and legumes are beneficial for longevity. They are staples in the diets of the longest living people in the world. In his interview with Dan Buettner, who's the author of The Blue Zones, he says that sadly 96% of Americans don't even reach the minimum recommended intake of 3 servings a week. I'm more inclined to agree with the American Institute for Cancer Research's suggestion of 3 servings a day of beans, split peas, chickpeas, or lentils with every meal. Who eats beans for breakfast? Well, lots of people around the world do, from baked beans in traditional English breakfasts to miso soup in Japan and idol in India, a type of steamed lentil cake. Legume intake may be the most important dietary predictor of survival in older people from around the globe, with an 8% reduction in risk of premature death for every 1 ounce increase in daily intake. So those are pretty powerful statistics, and I think that the reason that this website Paleo Leap is demonizing the beans and legumes is to promote other foods that are high in protein, like the animal products, which are not as healthy as the beans and legumes, but they are promoting on this website that they are. And just like a lot of paleo websites, they also say that saturated fat is not harmful.
So Dave said, look, Joe Kahn will tell you that fat is bad, but there's other doctors that'll tell you that it's good. That is such an unbelievable fallacy. These doctors, it's like the most, and so what they'll do is they'll point out, so here's the best study. So one of the studies said, okay, if I looked at everybody's, I did a study right now on everybody, and I looked at your saturated fat and I looked at your cholesterol, there would be no correlation because of intra-individual differences in how we respond. But if I put you all on a high saturated fat diet, all of your cholesterols would rise. This has been done in so what? So you get heart attack. So the next study was that they looked at saturated fat and heart disease. Well, saturated fat causes heart disease. But what they did is they took a control group that was on Lipitor. So the control group was taking a drug. They set the study up. They were funded by me. They set the study up to fail. And this is done all the time. They do things called peak fishing. I mean, there's all kinds of complex works, but if you don't know science, and I know science like crazy, it's all I do. If you don't know science and you're going on PubMed and you're just picking out one of 20,000 studies and saying, see, there's someone else who says something different, that's what the industry wants you to do. It's a tobacco trick. It's to say, look, he says one thing, he says another, so I love coffee with cream in it, so I'm going to drink the coffee. But the fact of the matter is, as soon as you get that fat, we've got studies that show that your vessels clamp down and your inflammation level goes sky high just with one coffee.
So these other doctors, like Dr. Mark Hyman, who runs functional medicine for Cleveland Clinic, who has a quote on the cover of my New York Times bestselling book about fat, and hundreds of others, including cardiac surgeons who recommend the bulletproof diet to their patients, they're all wrong, right?
They are wrong. Look at the epidemiology. If you look at the actual functional studies themselves, they're very, very clear. Now, so the University of Copenhagen had a huge group. They had every expert. I mean, guys, like for you, Michael Jordan might be your guys. For me, Appel and these different scientists are like my gurus. I'm like, oh my God. They all got together. They had a huge study. They looked at all the data. Hands down, saturated fat raises cholesterol and causes heart disease.
It's a little bit worrying to find websites like these when you just do a simple Google search about beans and legumes. And the other disturbing thing about this website is when you look at the recipes tab, the first thing that comes up is beef and red meat. And we know that red meat is very strongly linked to colon cancer. And in fact, you could say that it causes colon cancer. There's epidemiological studies that show that correlation between the consumption of red meat and colon cancer. And there are the mechanisms for it, like the heme iron. So it doesn't make sense for this website to be promoting beef and red meat. And not only is it unhealthy, but it's very taxing on the environment. The rainforests are being cut down to produce grass-fed beef. And in Australia, we've got wildlife habitation loss because of all the grass that's given to cows. And then we export the cows to other countries so that they can consume it. And this is totally unnecessary. We could be replacing that beef and red meat with vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and legumes and beans. And if you look further down this list of recipes, they've got chicken and poultry. So the top 5 tabs for recipes are all animal-based products. And then after that, you've got soups, salads, and veggies and stuff like that. So it's basically a vegetable and animal product diet. It seems to be low carb. They say that you can eat more carbs if you want, but they generally don't recommend you to eat beans and legumes and to avoid grains as well. So it's in complete opposition to the information that we see on websites like nutritionfacts.org. And nutritionfacts.org, I find, even though people might say it's biased because it's a vegan website, you can always look up the studies that it refers to. And Dr. Greger has read hundreds or thousands of studies about nutrition, and he compiles them into these awesome videos that show you the benefits of certain foods and also the downsides of certain foods. And he also has these annual lectures that show that animal source foods are linked with 14 out of the 15 leading causes of death in the Western world. And it's just ridiculous to see that websites like Paleo Leap are popping up to promote animal foods. And this website, I don't know how popular it is, but you can get emails about the paleo diet. You can have an ultimate paleo 30-day program. So people are coming to this website. Apparently there's about 4,000 people who like this page on Facebook. So the paleo diet is becoming quite popular, although I think the vegan diet might be replacing the popularity of the paleo diet. There's still that opposition there because of all the misinformation and apparently conflicting science. But if you look closely at the science, you look at study design and study results, you'll see that there's flaws in studies that say that saturated fat and dietary cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. And you'll find that ultimately it's the plant-based diet that is the healthiest. And not only is it the healthiest, but the least cruel to the animals and the best diet for the environment. If you want to save the environment, we should be eating plant foods. Let me know your thoughts about this website and whether you've tried the paleo diet. Also, tell me what you think about beans and whether you think they're unhealthy. So I'll see you in my next video. Bye.